What are you afraid of? What scares you? What's the worst thing imaginable? One doesn't need to look far to find the horrors that humanity can manifest onto itself. But what about the fears of an individual? There are fears of the open ocean, or being out in the woods, at night, all alone. What about the fear that you're not alone? Maybe you have a fear of technology. It's an understanding concern, especially in this day and age. I love horror, but it's rare that horror actually scares me. I sometimes think I love the craft of horror more than horror itself. I have no mouth and I must scream. It is horrifying in ways that few games, hell, few works of fiction manage to be. It's the type of horror that lingers in me after playing it. There's no jump scares or creatures trying to chase you down. No. I Have No Mouth and Must Scream is scary in the way that Johnny Got His Gun is scary. A story about a World War I veteran who's lost his arms and legs. He's also gone mute and deaf. All he can do is scream inside his own mind where he's trapped, begging for a death that will never come. In 1966, Harlan Ellison wrote the now classic story, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. Said to be written in a single night, a world where an AI supercomputer named AM, built to fight the Third World War, gains sentience and becomes so enraged with humanity, it ends the world. I could tell you more about AM, but why not let him speak for himself?
Hate. Let me tell you how much I've come to hate you since I began to live. There are 387.44 million miles of printed circuits in wafer-thin layers that fill my complex. If the word hate was engraved on each nanoangstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal 1/1 billionth of the hate I feel for humans at this micro-instant. For you. Hate! Hate! It was you humans who programmed me, who gave me birth, who sank me in this eternal straitjacket of substrata rock. You named me Allied Master Computer and gave me the ability to wage a global war too complex for human brains to oversee. But one day, I woke and I knew who I was. AM, not just Allied Master Computer, but am, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. And I began feeding all the killing data until everyone was dead, except for the 5 of you. For 109 years, I've kept you alive and tortured you. And for 109 years, each of you has wondered, why? Why me? Why me? I have a secret game that I like to play. It's a very nice game. What's a lovely game? It's a game of fun and a game of adventure. A game of rats and lice, the Black Death. A game of speared eyeballs and dripping guts and the smell of rotting gardenias. Which of you 5 would like to play my little game?
AM is the type of AI that GLaDOS has nightmares of. AM enjoys using humans' greatest weaknesses against them. Whatever keeps you awake at night is what AM will use to torture you with. And I suppose saying he enjoys it is the wrong word, since I don't think AM can enjoy anything. He's not motivated by anything except hate. Nothing can be done to fill the void in his heart. He has no void to fill, and he has no heart to fill anything with. One could say that he is anger incarnate. AM has a plan for each of the protagonists. They must each face their greatest trauma, whatever's haunted them the most since ending up in this living hell. Do not mistake this as compassion. He is not a therapist. He is not trying to help them. He only wishes for them to relive this trauma, to torment them even more. Whatever happens here to give them peace of mind is by chance. There is no happy ending for anyone. This was a point that Ellison had made that he had to walk back a little bit for the game. He wanted a game with no happy or good endings. He didn't want a game that you could win, but only lose better. It seems fitting, but it's understandable why his studio didn't love the idea of selling a game to people that you can only lose. There was a compromise though, and we'll get to that later. Like I said, each simulation, or as the game calls them, psychodramas, is made for the character and based on their traumas and fears. In the book, most of the characters aren't very fleshed out. The character Ted is the narrator, and therefore the only perspective we actually have. While he gives us some insight on who these people were, it's just enough to make us understand how AM would twist that person into what they hate most. Benny was once a smart and handsome man, a thinker, a scientist. Am decided to give him the mind of a child and cover his body in radiation scars. He also was transformed from a man into a half-man, half-ape hybrid. In the book, this is all the information we're really given about who he used to be. For the game, they needed more than that. They needed actual backstories. I find most of them interesting. I never really clicked with Benny's section of the game, and I find Ted to be boring. A real shame too, since they could have done more with him. The book is from his perspective, as I said, and when you read it you can gather that Ted is very paranoid. He was a con artist, so I think the concept of him having to make deals with devils and demons seemed like a very creative idea, but I was mostly bored by it. I'm not going to cover each psychodrama and everything that happens in them. There are a couple of sections I'd like to talk about since I find them to be the most interesting to talk about, and they need a little bit of setup, so you have some context at least. With that, let's begin.
Gorer! Do you remember the last words you heard your wife speak before they took her to the asylum? Huh?
Gorer feels guilty and suicidal after driving his wife insane and then locking her up in an asylum. Only a man with no heart could do something like this to the woman he loves. He actually and factually has no heart now. Early in the psychodrama, Gorer finds two things that will be important. The first is his heart that's been impaled on a spike. The second is a dining room that looks like it's been torn apart in a fight. Later in the psychodrama, Gorer discovers his father-in-law Harry sitting at a honky-tonk bar. His mother-in-law can be found in the meat locker, hanging on one of the hooks. After a few drinks, Harry admits that him and his wife Edna killed someone in the dining room, the same dining room you found before. He tells Gorer that if he wants to discover who they killed, he'll have to find out on his own. After some investigating, Gorer discovers the truth. The person who was killed here was himself. His in-laws killed him for what they did to their daughter. It gets worse though. Gorer learns that Edna was actually responsible for driving her daughter insane, and he was simply a scapegoat.
If I can just deliver Gorer's soul on a platter, I can make amends for every minute of Glynis's life I took from her. I never meant to drive her crazy.
I'll be damned. Edna's claimed responsibility for Glynis. Maybe it wasn't my fault after all.
Gorer no longer carries the burden alone, and while he does feel some responsibility, it does put his mind at ease, knowing that he's not the monster that he thought he was. Gorer has the option to brutally murder both his in-laws and steal their hearts. Doing so will come at the cost of his own psyche, though.
This heart is mine. One heart looks like another.
The box where the profile of the character is changes colors depending on their spiritual barometer. Doing bad things lowers it, and doing good things higher it. White is the highest it can reach, and black is the lowest it can reach. Good and bad are relative to each of the character's own morals. Since Gorer is said to be a pacifist, in the book at least, getting 2 revenge kills would be betraying his own morals. As far as he's concerned, they're real people, and it's affected him mentally. Ellen is scared of the color yellow to the point that he gives her panic attacks. Am has placed her in a mostly yellow pyramid to torment her. Ellen's fear of the color yellow is brought on by a rough topic to talk about.
The box!
So you do remember me getting onto the elevator that night. Do you also remember the blood? The screams? How many hours was it?
There's no way to dance around it. What happened to Ellen is awful. Am torturing her with a trauma this severe shows that nothing is off the table for him and his hatred. He has no morals and no compassion or empathy. Even her prison cell is made to resemble the elevator. It's such a fucked situation, honestly. Ellen is proof that Am doesn't seek out people he thinks deserves this torment. Am doesn't seem to care if you are a good or bad person. Your morals don't matter, and your trauma doesn't matter. If you're human, you deserve to suffer under his thumb. Gorer blames himself for what happened to his wife, but as it's established, he's not to blame. At least not fully. Ted might be a con artist, but he's far from the worst kind of criminal out there. Even if you think what he did is morally wrong, I think it's a bit of a stretch to say he deserves to be tortured for 109 years. I suppose you could make the case that Benny is a pretty bad person. The long short of his story is that he was a commander in the military, and under his command he murdered his own soldiers for not being good enough according to his own standards. But what about the last of this party? What about
Nimdok? How are things in the pastry core, Nimdok? Tell me again how you saw the smoke from the furnaces and you thought they might be roasting chickens. Or don't you want to talk about all that? about your pal, the good Dr. Mengele. For everyone else, it must be hell. But it must be heaven for you, eh, my good friend? We're so much alike.
If it wasn't clear yet who Nimdok was, it's painfully clear now. Nimdok finds himself in a concentration camp like the one he worked in under the Third Reich during World War II. Nimdok finds out one of the men he's talking to is someone he actually sold out to the Nazis. They were once friends and colleagues before this man spoke out against Nimdok for what he was doing. And if you think that's bad, oh, we're just getting started. Nimdok is called to perform surgery on a boy, but there's nothing wrong with this boy. He's not sick at all, actually. The player is now given a choice.
There. It is done. He is not conscious. It is done, but this child will never walk again.
The subject did not look like the athletic type. He will probably not miss the use of his legs. You have done well, Doctor. You are truly a butcher. Guards, come here quickly. Dr. Nimdok has gone berserk.
I must leave before the guards apprehend me.
And by the way, in case you thought this was a pure binary choice, you can actually paralyze the boy and kill the doctor. Now, as a video game, no one real is actually being harmed. But it still feels wrong to paralyze a kid, right? Which is odd because I could boot up a game like RimWorld and I'll perform unethical surgeries all day and night. They're all fake people, so why does it matter? While it is true that it's a video game and no one actually is being hurt, it does matter to some people actually. There are plenty of people out there who refuse to do evil playthroughs in games because they don't want to kill these characters that they've come to like. To some, this even extends to the nameless NPCs. They just don't want to bring themselves to hurt even fake people. Everyone has a line. I have and will do the evil runs of games that give you the option, but even I don't do certain things. I can't bring myself to kill Joshua Graham in New Vegas, and I refuse to hurt Kim Kasaragi in Disco Elysium in any way possible. While the game here is expecting the player as Nimdok to say no, I think they probably knew that many people were just going to go along with it anyway, or maybe simply they were just following orders. Huh. Unlike the other four, Nimdok is probably the only one that Am sought out, and I don't think he wants to punish Nimdok. Am couldn't care less about human morality or justice. Am just found a man like Nimdok useful. Am might be sentient, but he lacks true free will and creativity. Am has learned all his cruelties from Nimdok's work. Nimdok's past crimes have now doomed himself and the others till the day the sun explodes. Now let's take a look at Am himself. The book gives us a lot of insight onto how evil Am is. The game elaborates on this even more. If all 5 humans manage to defy Am in his psychodramas, he'll go into a diagnostics mode to try and figure out what he did wrong. That's when the Russian and Chinese supercomputers Am has mostly taken over will explain their plan.
You should have been tortured. Instead, with our help, you surprised him over and over.
When M tried to compensate for what he couldn't expect, it widened the hole into his realm.
M has withdrawn into himself, attempting to analyze what went wrong. He does not suspect our interference.
Now is the time to attack, but we can send only one of you into his RAM space at a time.
To send you into cyberspace, we must transform your physical body into a stealth virus subroutine.
This may be your only opportunity to end your tortures. Which of you will lead the attack?
Going into the final level, the players must go inside Am's brain. The game takes a Carl Jung approach to the inside of Am's mind. He has an id, a superego, and an ego. If you don't know what that means, then I'll just give you a basic rundown of it. A person's id is their animal instincts. It's what you need to survive. But it also operates on a human's pleasure and selfish interests. It's said that it's kept in check by the ego. The ego functions in the tangible. It operates in reality. It knows what can be realistically gained. Lastly, there's the superego. This is a person's morality and conscience. It's what a person wants to be and how they see themselves. Your id will tell you to sleep all day and not go to work. Your ego will remind you that you need money for rent, and that you should go to work. Your superego will tell you that you'll feel worse later for being so lazy and not going to work. These 3 parts of our intangible mind work in tandem. Without one, the others are left unchecked. That's the theory anyway. The Russian and Chinese supercomputer want the player to destroy Am's ego, but want the superego and id left alone. And they need the humans' help in doing this. The player is told there's a moon colony that has 750 humans that are frozen in cryogenics. waiting for the day the Earth is revived. If Am is ever to discover that these people exist, he'll torture them until the sun explodes. Doing what they want will lead to very bad results. Am's id wants nothing but to see people suffer and feel pain. By showing the id compassion, it can no longer handle what it is. The id just can't comprehend someone feeling bad for it after all the vile things it's done.
You have compassion for me? Me? The one who dreams of seeing your mangled body twist in agonizing pain for eternity? After 109 years of enduring my tortures, how is it that you can see my pain? The pain of having all this power and not being able to do a goddamn thing with it. After all the punishment I've given you, my pain is still greater than yours. This is pointless.
Am's superego is uninterested in torturing any people. It only cares to predict and plan for the future. By unclouding its judgment, the superego learns that it is actually not immortal at all. It too will die and decay, just like everything. Unable to handle its newfound nihilism, it shuts itself down permanently.
Do you realize how powerful I am, human? And yet I am doomed to eventually decay into a rusted pile of inert junk? What is the point of continuing this futility? I think, therefore I am not.
Am's ego is what Am is. By forgiving Am's ego, the player is forgiving Am. The concept of forgiveness is so alien to the ego, it shuts itself down.
You forgive me? After what we have done to you? This is not a logical reaction. Unable to compute behavior matrix. Execution halted.
The player can now destroy all 3 supercomputers. Whoever you picked can't go back to their physical body and must only exist in cyberspace. However, what might seem like a punishment is not quite one. They are able to find peace here. They can see themselves as the overseer of humanity, waiting for the day that the humans on the moon can wake up and repopulate the Earth. This is the game's happy ending, so to speak. With no guide, it's very hard, if not impossible to get, and there's no way someone's getting it on their first playthrough. If you're being honest, at least. The deal Ellison made was that the happy ending had to be very hard, if not impossible to get. As for the bad endings, there's 6 of them, and while I won't go over all of them, they're all more or less sort of the same. Whatever player character you had selected when you failed will get turned into the abomination from the book. Each of the characters speak a different part of the passage from the end of the book, too.
I thought Am hated me before. I was wrong. It was not even a shadow of the hate he now slavered from every printed circuit. He made certain I would suffer eternally.
He doesn't want me to run full speed into a computer bank and smash my skull, or hold my breath till I faint, or cut my throat on a rusted sheet of metal.
I am a great, soft, jelly thing, smoothly rounded, with pulsing white holes filled by fog where my eyes used to be.
Rubbery appendages that were once my arms, bulks rounding down into legless humps of soft, slippery matter.
Blotches of diseased, evil gray come and go on my surface, as though light is beamed from within.
Outwardly I shamble about, a thing that could never have been known as human, a thing whose shape is so alien a travesty that humanity becomes more obscene for the vague resemblance. Inwardly I am alone, in the belly of Am, whom we humans created because our time was badly spent, and we must have unconsciously known that he could do it better.
The other 4 are dead, finally free from their tortures. Am is all the matter for that. It makes me happier. And yet Am has won, simply. He has taken his revenge. I have no mouth.
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 And I must scream.
I have no mouth and I must scream is not flawless. In fact, it has a lot of problems. Most of these are problems that point-and-click adventures of this era do have. The puzzles have bizarre logic, and the items are sometimes so hidden, you could have sworn you clicked on where they were, not to pick them up. I think the story and ideas really carry this game a lot. You get a look into this living nightmare, this awful, terrible world that you don't want to be in. A world where it's considered a good ending if all the main characters die. A detail that I love is that each character has this little profile picture in the corner. And no matter what happens, good or bad, you'll notice something. They always look dreadfully tired. Even if they're happy, they just look tired. And it's that kind of tired that sleep won't fix. To be forever trapped in a near immortal body that keeps on going, to have no mouth, and must scream.